Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's. To the emperor the things that are..." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. Will you pray with me? Holy and loving God, when you formed the heavens and the earth, you called everything that you made good. And then you made us, and you called us good as well. You imprinted your image upon us and taught us about love. So remind us today of your commandment upon us all to love one another. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Sean was a young man who grew up with my kids in Middlesex. I probably first met him when he was about 8 or 9 years old. He was born in the year between my two eldest. Sean's father, Dave, and I both served together on the board, the council of our kids' soccer league. He was the president of the league. I was the treasurer. Sean was a goalie, and from what I knew about him, what I saw, I didn't really see many of his games because I had girls, and Sean was not on the girls' team, of course. But from what I could see, Sean was a pretty good goalie. Around his senior year in high school, Sean made a mistake. He made a pretty big mistake. He went to a party down the shore. Now, he had always been a responsible kid. His father had told me that they had never had any reason to think otherwise. But while he was at that party down the shore, someone offered him some Oxycontin. Oxycontin is among the most addictive drugs and has become a significant problem in the country and especially among high school students. Sean pretty quickly became addicted. And he struggled with that addiction in private for the entirety of his senior year in high school, but at some point he got up the courage to tell his parents about it. And as any good parent would do, they tried to get him the help that he needed. For 12 years, Sean struggled. He would go into rehab and he would be okay for a while, and then he would slip, and then he would not be okay for a while. And at some point in those 12 years, he moved on to heroin. It was a vicious cycle, and Sean died almost 2 years ago at the age of 30. But for that 12-year period, Sean's identity, his entire identity, became synonymous with his addiction. It was no longer Sean the goalie. It was no longer Sean the friend. It was no longer Sean the brother, Sean the son, Sean the neighbor. He was Sean the addict. And that word, addict, became engraved on the memory that most people have of Sean. But you see, it wasn't just Sean that had that word imprinted on them. I remember hearing the rumors when he first started down this path, or at some point on this path, and there were rumors, as would happen in any community, about his drug problem, and by extension his family, his parents, his sister became identified by Sean's addiction. Now within the passage of Matthew that we've read today, there's this very famous phrase, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. Many have tried to boil this entire story down, because we have been in Matthew 21 and 22 for a few weeks now, and many people try to boil that whole 2-chapter story down to that one sentence. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, give to God what belongs to God. And on the surface, it may even sound like a fair deal. Give to God what is God's. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Sure, that's fair. Right? That's what we all want for ourselves. Give to me what is mine. Give to you what is yours. That's fair and square. But to boil that story down to that one sentence means that we lose its full meaning, just as we lose sight of all of the good that came from knowing Sean and knowing his family when we only identify him with that one terrible word. Now, as I said, over the last few weeks, we've been immersed in the 21st and 22nd chapters of Matthew. The chief priests and the elders of the temple have been desperately trying to entrap Jesus with his own words. They keep asking him questions, hoping that he will trip and incriminate himself. But every single time, Jesus turns the tables on them. You'd think they'd get the hint. Well, actually, maybe they did get the hint, because this time, it wasn't the chief priests and the elders that went to him. It was their disciples. They sent their underlings. Maybe they thought that since Jesus was on to them, they'll send someone else who maybe Jesus didn't recognize, and he'll let his guard down and slip up. But even more than that, not only did they send their underlings, but they also sent some Herodians, some people loyal to Herod. So the religious enemies of Jesus aligned with the political enemies of Israel. It's like a cat and a bird aligning together to trap the dog. They think they have it all figured out. They're so smug. Does the law allow people to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus sees right through all of this. Does the law allow people to pay taxes to Caesar or not? If Jesus says yes, then the chief priests and the temple leaders would have the ammunition that they need to discredit him for heresy. If he says no, then the Herodians would have the ammunition they need to arrest Jesus for treason. They've got him either way. But you know, it's not unlike the problem that we see in the world today. So many people think about everything in terms of black and white. You're either in this group or you're in this group. And if you're in this group, then you hate this group. And if you're in this group, then you hate that group and everything they stand for. We're so polarized that we can no longer see the spectrum of what's in the middle. We only see the polarization. We only see the black and we only see the white. And that's why Jesus' response completely befuddled the questioners. He successfully escaped their trap that they laid for him. He doesn't answer the question of either or, but instead he throws the issue right back at them. They will have have to decide for themselves, just as we have to decide for ourselves where to draw the line between Caesar's jurisdiction and God's jurisdiction. But on another level, Jesus' response has a much deeper meaning for us all. See, when he asks for a coin, he also asks, whose head, whose image is this? The coin, of course, bears Caesar's image. It belongs to Caesar. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. What bears Caesar's image? A coin. Give to God what is God's. What bears God's image? We do. We bear God's image. We may have a pocket full of coins bearing Caesar's image, but we are not made in Caesar's image. The earth and the sky and the sea and all of the creatures of this world bear God's image. We bear God's image. We are created in God's image. We may have to pay tax to Caesar, but we don't belong to Caesar. We belong to God. When Jesus makes that very famous statement, he is putting God and Caesar, it may seem like he's putting God and Caesar on equal footing. But to do so would only elevate Caesar to the same level as God. And that would imply that we might be compelled to believe that our allegiance can be given equally or as easily to one or the other. But Caesar is not God. We bear God's image. And wherever humans live, wherever humans operate, whether in social, economic, political, or religious contexts, we belong to God. The image that is cast within us is God's. And our primary loyalties do not switch when we move from context to context. We do not exit the church and get into our cars and cease being cast in the image of God. We do not leave the church and go out to our jobs or to our communities or to our shopping centers or even to our voting booths and cease to be imprinted with the image of God. For the image of God is cast upon each of us permanently. It is difficult to imagine that Jesus would see much of anything falling outside of what belongs to God. Even the temple leaders and the Herodians, they belong to God. Herod belongs to God. Caesar belongs to God. So what do you suppose Jesus thought about that single coin bearing Caesar's image? He may very well have said, sure, give that worthless piece of tin to Caesar. But Caesar belongs to God. If we are to give to God what belongs to God, then we must give our whole selves to the one who has imprinted divinity upon us. And friends, that ain't Caesar. As we belong to the Creator, we should therefore find it impressed upon our hearts and our souls to know more about the Creator. And as we do that, we are empowered to find the means of grace that identifies us and others as God's possession. We are imprinted, we are empowered to seek justice, to seek healing, rather than power and authority. We are imprinted and we are empowered to see the Christ in others rather than look for ways to find fault. The temple leaders and the chief priests, they put their own desire for power, for wealth, for status above the needs of the people that they were called to serve. And as you may recall, just days before this story, just days before Jesus says these words, or if not the day before, Jesus came into the temple and overturned all of the tables of the money changers and accused the temple leaders of turning God's house into a den of thieves. These temple leaders established an environment in which the wealthy and well-connected could gain entrance, but the poor and those most in need could not. In our world of polarized loyalties and competing demands, it becomes so easy for us to lose sight of the fact that we, along with the coins in our pocket, along with the idols in our lives, we all belong to God. It is God's image imprinted on our hearts, and it is God's image that must be imprinted on our lives. in how we love our neighbor, in how we live in our community, in how we worship God, in how we treat others that are cast aside by an uncaring world, the poor, the sick, the marginalized, all of those who are similarly, likewise imprinted with God's image just as we are. God is the creator of this world. God created the world and called it good. God created us and called us very good. Even with God's image imprinted on us, we still must live within the context of this world. And giving to God what is God's is more than just a passive activity. It's an action. It requires much more than we often realize. But if God's image is imprinted on our hearts and we are to give to God what is God's, then it is clear that Jesus is telling us that we cannot be passive in our life of faith. So often, we look at others like Sean, and we see the wrong thing imprinted on them. We see the addiction. We see the political affiliation. We see who they love. We see what religion they practice, or whatever it is that we consider to be their flaws. And that becomes the only imprint that we perceive. No matter what demons Sean fought while he was with us, he was imprinted with the image of God. And therefore he was beautiful in God's eyes. I so wish Sean knew that before he died. That he was of sacred worth no matter what. But having God's image imprinted on us means that we need to be ready for the life-changing, life-affirming consequences and blessings that come with it. Having God's image imprinted on your life means that the God whose love for us has never changed will never forsake you. Having God's image imprinted on your life means that when you give your life outside of these four walls, when you show the world the image that is imprinted upon you, you will be amazed at the blessings that await you. You're opening up to the possibilities of the transformation that God offers each of us. So be not afraid. Be not afraid. There will be challenges, to be sure. But the image of God, which is already imprinted on your heart, will guide you. It will enable you. It will strengthen you. It will reveal who and whose you are, and that you are of sacred worth. You are precious. You are priceless in God's eyes. To God be the glory. But go now as those who have found favor in the sight of God. Be imprinted with the love of Jesus Christ and imitators of his example to all of his life and death. To the world in which you live, give your love, give your service, and to God, give all that you are and all that you shall be. And may the glory of God's goodness be revealed in you. May the grace and peace of Jesus Christ take root in you. And may the inspiration of the Holy Spirit fill you with joy. My friends, we go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Amen.